I'm Melody Hossaini. I'm CEO of Inspire Engage International and Mindset Coach, and I'm so thrilled to be part of Voices of the Future.
It is an absolute pleasure and absolutely delightful to welcome Melody Hossaini. We came together a few years ago and we had a lovely deep chat, but we've come back again and we are going to pick up all of the bits and pieces from there. Melody Hossaini is the CEO of Inspire Engage International. She's a mindset coach, but that just does not do justice to her. She is an entrepreneur. She is a mother. She has been a refugee. She has seen the world from different places, and her narrative and her story has really evolved over time. And that's why I have such deep respect for her authenticity, and her energy that she brings to these types of conversations. Melody, welcome.
I really appreciate that. Thank you so much, Tarek. That was, it's not often you hear introductions of yourself in that way, but I appreciate that. And it's so lovely to circle back and meet again during this time, because it was quite a few years ago that we met. So it's a pleasure for me to be here. Thank you so much.
It's a real pleasure, and this is how we build our connections and our long-term relationships, and I'm a great believer in that. And even though 6-7 years have lapsed, it was almost as if it was yesterday, and I find that really heartwarming, because when you build a quality trust relationship, you can always come back, and so thank you for that. So early gratitude to you.
No, I appreciate that. And the world is so small. We met in UAE, in Ras Al Khaimah, at that event. Yes. And here we are. I'm in UK, you're in Dubai, and it's great to connect.
Melody, you shared some amazing stories about your early stages of your life. Would you like to build some context and some background in terms of your narrative about your journey through life?
We are all products of our experiences, aren't we? And our roots. And the way our brains' connections are built are through those very early experiences that you and I can't even remember that happened. And we are who we are, the roots that are built because of those early years. My early years were wonderful in the first couple of years. And then I was born in Iran, and we had to face a decision to flee war. A bomb actually dropped on our neighbor's road. So we fled by land all the way to Sweden, where I grew up. And, starting life somewhere like that, Sweden was wonderful. And I lived there for 10, 11 years and shaped a lot of how I see the world today. But I also experienced racism. I also experienced warm Persian communities, and really had to figure out who I was amidst all of that. I remember, one of the really early important lessons I've learned was we used to go to the beach, and the Swedes, my friends, Swedish friends, would show up on their bikes, one towel, and that was all they needed. And they showed up very quietly. They're very quiet people. Quietly, they sunbathed, they swam, and they went home on their bike. There was my family. There was like 50 of us, many families together. We would come with our dumbak and our cello kebab, the games, the music, the food, and all of that. And I was like embarrassed, because I was like, oh my goodness, this is so embarrassing. And I was very young. I was like about 8, 9 years old. And my dad put his hand on my shoulder and said, Melody, you have to be you. And I found it so frustrating, because I was like, Dad, even if I didn't want to be me, I have to be me. What do you mean? I can only be me no matter what I want. But of course, the meaning of that, what I came to understand was, you have to figure out who you are and be true to who you are. So I learned that lesson in Sweden. And then, because of an awful incident that happened, that we were held at gunpoint in our own home at the age of 11 and 12, my brother and I, and a gunman came into our home, held us at gunpoint, and said, we're going to murder your mom if she comes home while we're here. And we were gagged and thrown into a wardrobe. Awful incident. And because of that, we decided to move. So we moved to England, where we started a new life. Again, very, very difficult. But I had to, again, figure out who I was and what was important. So when I was at school and was severely being bullied in a very awful environment, I would say now, looking back, worst years of my life were schooling years in the UK. I decided to invest my energy into something else. And at the age of 13, decided to get involved in community development, changing laws, making things better. And so became co-founder of UK Youth Parliament at the age of 13.
That is an amazing achievement at that early age, and I know how you differentiated yourself. So, Melody, that's brilliant. Fast forward to today. What else have you done in terms of your learning and qualifications? I know you've recently been to Stanford, but can you share some of the other, because you've done, you graduated in many things. So can you share a little bit of that, please?
First of all, like you, Tariq, I would like to think that I'm a graduate of, the school of life, really. My greatest teachers have been my experiences, the incredible people that I've met. I remember just random things, like I was sitting on the grass one day in Los Angeles, California. I went there to do training with the Dalai Lama and Nobel Peace Prize winners on community. But actually, the thing that I remember most was sat on the grass in the sun. And this was at Loyola University in LA. And this young guy, he couldn't have been more than about 14. He came up to me and he said, "Oh, I love what you said. I love what you're about." And I said, "Well, what do you do? Tell me about yourself." And he said, "My family are in gangs and I've seen gang violence. My brother's in prison, my dad's in prison. But I just want to give. I want to give to people. I want to change communities. I want to be part of change." And I just, to me, that blows my mind. That moves me more than years at university, because I think if you can be a product of that environment, but you want to give and you want to create change, and I've got a million of these stories that really I feed into the fabric of my being and my thought that fuel me. So that I would say is my greatest learning, is the conversations I have and the experiences that I have to go through myself that really fuel my understanding of the world. But of course, I've done a law degree at Oxford Brookes University, which I loved and fueled my passion for justice. I've also recently completed a study at Stanford University on the neurology, the neuroscience, and the psychology of happiness and well-being, very recently, just this year. That was a really, really interesting experience to become a student again and to hand in papers. But I am absolutely passionate about the way that the mind works.
And that's a lovely segue into the discussion as a mindset coach. I go into a lot of boards and C-level environments, and most people ask me, what do I do there? And they think I'm a speaker, I'm a transformation expert, and so on. I'm all of those. And I said, the only thing I really need to do is actually mindset shift, move the needle. Because if that's not going to happen, nothing is going to happen. Nothing will take shape in that environment. And let me share a different analogy, a medical analogy, and that is we all have immune systems, and our immune system responses are basically anything coming from outside, any virus coming to attack us, our antibodies come in and block it. Corporations have immune systems, institutions have immune systems, and our internal immune systems are what blocks anything coming from outside, any change, anything new. And then the list of excuses start. We've never done this before, it's too expensive, we'll fail, we're not ready for it, and. And I have a list of 50 excuses that I present to all of the board members and the C-suite, and I sort of said, well, you need to identify the top 3 that you have used every time. And it's a very effective exercise. I get them thinking that this is how they have started their whole mindset, that they're going to be sitting like this and saying, oh, what the hell is this guy going to tell us about future and transformation? We know everything, we know our business. So the immune system response becomes the block, becomes the stoppage in terms of progress, in terms of growth, in terms of transformation. From your perspective, and you've seen a lot of this in your lifetime, what are the kind of immune systems and the resistance points that you keep getting at companies and in schools or wherever you go and how are you addressing this?
Thank you for sharing that story. I absolutely love the work that you're doing, and the point that you raise is such a valid one. Now, the way that I like to think is mindset disruption, and I call it an energy wave disruption. So you shift that energy, right? You talked about mindset shift. Now, resistance is interesting. The way that I like to open up that window of the energy wave disruption is by, I speak to clients, we go into businesses as well and work with teams, or whether we're working with educational institutions. What I like to say is to people, look, everything has to start with you. When you go in, because a lot of the mistake we make is to start with the what. So what do you want to do? All of these things. And we ask young people as well, what do you want to do when you're older? But we rarely ask people, who do you want to be? Who do you want to become? Who we are does not fundamentally change. We grow. We don't fundamentally change. But what we do could change 5, 6 times in a lifetime, right? And who we are is the basis for what we do as well. So I always want to start there, introspect, whether I'm working with a room of 1,000 people doing a keynote speech, or whether I'm working with a team or one individual doing my mindset coaching, I always start with identity. Who are you? Who do you want to be? What are your values? What are you led by? What are you passionate about? How would you describe yourself and why? So when we connect with a deep part of who we are, therein is a great foundation for the other things. You can't look at the world if you don't know where you're standing. You cannot look at change and what you want to do if the inside of you isn't clear, if you are not on your side. So a lot of the time, people try and make decisions about what they want to do without thinking about who they are. And actually, they're being so influenced by outside factors when actually all they need to do is be connected to themselves. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that I like to say to people, now this is going to sound super ridiculous. I'll just pick up a random pen here. Right, Tariq, now is a magic fairy is going to come into the room. And when they wave their wand around, in 30 seconds, you can choose what you want to have. Paint a picture and the magic fairy will make it happen. The only thing is you've got to be very, very detailed about what you want. Are you ready? Countdown from 10, 10, 9, 8. Right, let's go. Boom. What do you want? Paint me a picture. When you put people on the spot like that, and they're forced to paint a picture, they go into a subconscious area of their mind. There may be desires that they've held quietly. They haven't been bold enough to really bring it out, or bring it out even in their mind, or definitely not said it out loud. Or there may be things where they're entertaining their mind and they're allowing themselves, because it's so ridiculous, because it's a magic fairy and it's not real, they're allowing their mind to be entertained and they're saying it. Now, this exercise is purely directional. It's to provide you with a direction. It doesn't mean that, okay, well, great, let's now talk about the 5-step plan of how we're going to make that happen. That's not the point, because otherwise we would have need to do proper planning. The point of it is it just provides you a direction. Come out of your narrow box of all the things we can't do, all the realities of all the problems, and just move out and go, for a minute, this is so ridiculous that I'm going to flow with it. And therein you get a vision, and that vision can simply inform the direction of where your mind needs to go. And I find that such a powerful outcome that I get with clients, that is such a powerful thing you can do with your mind.
It's a very interesting analogy that you gave there in terms of fairy coming in. I go beyond that, because one of the key things I say is that change is too slow. We need to transform. And then I say, no, we don't need to transform. We need to metamorphose. A caterpillar does not decide to become a bigger, fatter, faster caterpillar. At some point in time, it has to make a decision that I need to become a butterfly. And that point in time, it goes into its pupa, and it actually physically, chemically liquidizes itself, and then comes out as this beautiful, blazing, vibrant butterfly, and then flies away 1,000 miles. And I'm saying the way we are in the world today, We just can't be an incrementally fatter caterpillar anymore. We need to fundamentally shift. And that metamorphosis is what I talk about. My TEDx talk was that only the mad will thrive. And, and the madness was about you need to be able to make that huge leap. That leap is necessary, Melody, and that's not happening. And what I just heard from you, I'm just wondering whether we are still in an incremental phase rather than a transformational or a metamorphosis phase. What are your thoughts of how people can reinvent themselves? Not just try and adjust themselves, but literally reinvent themselves from inside.
See, everybody has a different approach. I can paint you a picture and I see it completely in a certain way. Another person may see it in something completely different. You see, there's a power in differences in how we interpret something. Some people, you're right, need to reinvent. They need to take a leap. We need to go. We need to invest. We need to think big. We need to go for it. Some people need to take a step, and that's where their starting point is at. You see, the human mind is so beautifully sophisticated. We are so very different. People are so very different. Their starting points, their history of how they got to where they've got to is so beautifully varied. So I guess through working the last few years very deeply on one-to-one mindset coaching and following clients' journeys for a span of 3-4 years has really allowed me to very much appreciate that sometimes we as thought leaders can sometimes simplify the journey of the human mind and the human experience. And actually, if we allow the tools to be there, but people to have the power, because it is about empowerment, to interpret it in their own way, in a way that fits them and their life and their starting point, I find that to be the most powerful facilitation that I can do.
That's great. What I'm seeing in terms of reinvention, one of the things I talk about, that I have reinvented myself almost completely 3 or 4 times in my life, very, very distinctly. I failed as an accountant, so I came back as in a business sales development itself, and I reinvented myself with another job, and when I reinvented myself as a futurist 6-7 years ago. It was a conscious decision because I was thinking to myself, I've always enjoyed the future, but I need to define something. So there I did the magic fairy and created my own scenario that I see myself as a futurist, and what does that mean? And that evolved, and I started learning new things. I started reading new things, researching new stuff, putting connections and putting the dots together. And it was a complete reinvention. A lot of people said to me, it's like, you're losing the plot here. Maybe it's midlife crisis. I mean, what is this futurist nonsense? And 10 years ago, there were no futurists. Today, every second person is a futurist. Today, and then new jobs are being created and so on. So I think with all of these new jobs and new job descriptions coming out, Dell said that 70% of the jobs in 2030 do not exist today. So if you think of it like that 70% of us will have a new job with a new description, using new tools, and being completely different. This is not change. This is, to me, way beyond change. And this is, to me, more of a reinvention rather than just trying to change it now. Mental agility, resilience, and now adaptability become critical. But I want to challenge you on this, is that how do we build our minds and make them really strong and adaptable to cope with the future?
That's a really good question. See, this is the key question, is how do we prepare our minds? And I love that you asked that rather than prepare ourselves. It is about preparing our minds. See, and there is now many things to talk about this topic. This answers a really key question, and there are many segments to this of how we prepare our minds to cope with change.
Which means our law degree, our engineering degree, a science degree, it's not relevant. I think our human emotions are relevant. I think our ability to do things, our strength of our mind is relevant, as opposed to a job or a skill. And while you're gathering your thoughts, I'll share a story about somebody I met yesterday. And it was a group of about 7, 8 people. I was invited to just chat to them, to inspire them, wake them up, shake them up a little bit. And I was going around the room and I asked one of the guys, so I said, what's going to define your future? And he said, consistency. And then he stopped. I looked at him and then he said, continuity. I said, seriously? You think the future is going to be defined by consistency and continuity? I said, you sound like a robot. And I can promise you, a robot will be 10 times more consistent and 100 times more in terms of continuous motion. So consistency is not the future because that will go through a process. But adaptability is your future. Creativity is your future. Imagination is your future. Love, harmony, connection. Those are the elements that are going to define your future. Because anything and everything that can be digitized will be, because it'll be 1,000 times cheaper and 1,000,000 times faster. That anything and everything else, like love and harmony and compassion and judgment, ethics, soul, spirit, all of these things are going to be 1,000,000 times more valuable. And they were in baby products, this company. And I'm saying, you're telling me consistency is the most important thing? I think your values are the most important thing. And that is who you are. And it was a very interesting conversation yesterday. And he was like really shocked because nobody had pushed him back like that. Because he is operationally efficient and he's consistent. People who are operationally efficient would be out of a job in 7 years or less. You need to be beyond operationally efficient. You actually need to be finding new ways to do it, and the power of our mind. And with all this generative AI and ChatGPT and stuff like that that's going on, I keep saying that I think we're still 20, 30, 40 years ahead because of our mind. The only two things that are left that are ahead, one is our heart and the other is our mind. And these are the only two things that are left which keeps us in a lead. That is what we need to be building, our emotions, our connections, our relationships, all of that inside, and then all our creativity and imagination and agility and
that's it.
All of those. That's it.
And this is the thing, you talk about, for many years, I used to call myself a human investor. Why? Because I believe we need to invest in human potential. That's what I've been saying for years, is that, if you look at the skills for the future, what's going to be needed? You ask people up until a year ago, 2 years, people used to say, oh, coding, programming. I'm like, no, we're going to have that coming out of our ears. It's going to be, that's what's going to be around us. What we need.
Coding is going to disappear by 2030 because it'll be done by generative AI, a ChatGPT bot, because literally the coding graph goes like that in 2029 and it just collapses down to zero.
The point is, it won't be technology related. The skills that we need are human skills, emotional intelligence, negotiation, complex problem solving. These are the skills that are going to be of value. We had a client of ours and they were talking about, how much asset they've got in the business. And, somebody came into their office and looked around and said, whoever's job can be automated is not of an asset to you in this company. It's whoever's got that human potential. So then this is a real task now for young people, because if you're a young person, what do you need to now do? Recently, A-level results came out in this country, GCSE A-level results. It's a big deal because it's a really important stepping stone to whether you go to university or whether you do something else. Because of COVID and what happened, the results this year were really, really low, right? Now, young people were completely, that week in the UK was almost at a standstill because young people were like, what am I now going to do? And it's as if the whole education system was now the be-all, end-all of their future. But of course, you and I know that the education system isn't actually built for the future. The whole education system in its traditional sense is extremely outdated in preparing you for this future that you and I are talking about. So young people need to stop and think, this is one path. There are so many other paths. So resilience is key. In the face of change, resilience is key. There's that famous quote by Einstein that says that, everybody's a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it's going to live its whole life believing it's stupid. We need to stop defining one route for people, but it is our own responsibility to be resilient enough to say, okay, this didn't work, or this change happened, because there's so much change coming. and to say, okay, well, this is okay. This didn't go as I planned, but I need to pick myself up, think of new creative ways, have conversations with people, connect to people. I actually feel connection is very important. I want to talk about connection for a second. Not connecting is like charging your phone when the wire isn't quite in, you know? Connecting to people, finding that common thread, that human connection. There is just no other word for it. It's called connection. You know, where you feel like I'm getting you, you're getting me, we're having a moment. This is interesting. My mind feels stimulated. You're provoking my thoughts. I've got something interesting to say. You're hearing me and I'm hearing you. That connection, I'm understood. We have a deep need for that as human beings. Lack of that really affects our well-being. So seeking that connection in the world, providing moments of that connection is another way in which I think we can maintain those human skills and create these human moments that are going to be so important in the face of change.
You did a lot of social enterprise work in your sort of just previous career. When I last met you, you were doing a lot of speaking. Can you give us a quick snippet of that phase of your life where you were going around connecting people, winning hearts and minds?
Yeah, I'm still in that phase, Tariq. I'm still very much passionate about social enterprise. It's just that social enterprise was a relatively new concept in a way. It was very sexy for a while in terms of the business model. Now I think there are so many social missions, there's so many social enterprises, and I find that absolutely lovely to see. But I really think the more we can look at business models that addresses a social mission and that sits at the heart of what we do, the more important that is, both for business, but also for it's needed. The world needs it. There are so many important social impact missions that we could really invest energy into and create successful, thriving businesses around that I want to see. And there's some wonderful examples of it in the world as well. But I'm really passionate about that space. Yeah.
Your current work is also taking you to younger children, and like you said, that you've got a clean canvas. Let's work on them and shape them, rather than people who are already mutated, people like us who are a little bit older, and shape them and bring them back into some kind of alignment. What do you find is the difference between a 5-year-old and a 50-year-old? And what are the different kinds of tools that you use for the two?
Yeah, really interesting question. So it was after COVID, because before COVID, if I said to a 5-year-old, 7-year-old, can you please come and sit down? We're going to do mindset and resilience and confidence building on the computer. That just would never happen. But of course, because they did the home learning, I just realized, and because also not just the young people would come to the computer, children would come and sit down and do this. It's also the parents felt there was a need because they spent Monday to Monday with their children and saw how they respond to learning or challenges compared to only seeing them on a Saturday, Sunday, where you're busy running to classes and having dinner and whatever, and then it's school day again. So seeing that side of children, they realized it's not just a quick fix of getting them a maths tutor. Perhaps my child needs space to work on their mind and work on how they resolve problems and conflict, or investing in themselves and understanding who they want to become. So that's where the space was created, and we launched Coaching for Kids. And that Coaching for Kids program is for 4-year-olds to 16-year-olds on developing their mindset, their strength, their identity, all of these important themes that really shapes who we are, and how we see things, how we see the world, and also to be happy. You know, we don't talk about happiness enough. Happiness is such an important theme. You know, it's so central. So before I talk about happiness, on Coaching for Kids, it's just been absolutely wonderful. One of the best things that I've worked on, actually. And in answer to your question of how it's different to working with a 5-year-old, other than, spelling out words, and it can take, literally 10 minutes to spell out a word, but with 5-year-olds compared to 50-year-olds. But I feel that with our older generation, we are undoing a lot of habits that have taken years to build up. You know, I'm working with clients and we're tracing back some of where their mindset habits came from and how you can shift it. And kind of like a training, you know, where if I told you, Tariq, let's go and here's a really great leg exercise, and you do it the first day, it's going to hurt. And you have to keep on going and training your leg in order to see the results. It's the same with our adult clients. We've got to keep training it to develop the new mindset patterns. Of course, with a 5-year-old, none of those habits are there. Their mind is so open to learning. And it's a challenge in a way because they're limited by way of their deep understanding of how the brain functions and what the consequences are of our actions, which you and I understand. We understand consequence. A child doesn't understand and hasn't experienced that. So the way that we work with children is get them excited about how the world could look like, how things could turn out like, paint them that really positive imagery, and they aspire to that as opposed to avoiding the mistakes, you know? And so it's a really interesting, positive way of working with children. And I absolutely love that area of work, as I do working with my adult clients.
So can you please take me to the 50-year-olds? And before you go there, I'll share an Alvin Toffler, an educationist and a philosopher, and he said that the illiterate of the future are not going to be the ones who cannot read or write. They're going to be the ones who cannot unlearn, learn, and relearn. And those are the illiterates of the future. So when I am talking to older people, is to say, what are the things we need to unlearn first? And only then we can start learning new things. So we need to clean out our bad habits and so on. So how do you bring about that kind of mindset shift in the average 50-year-old executive in a company? And how difficult is it? And what are the tools that you use for that?
So to give you an example, so the conversations that I have with clients, it really begins very much on an exploratory basis. When we start exploring, as opposed to going in hard on something, we tend to really give a big picture. Within that big picture, there'll be moments that shaped you, things you find challenging from your own view, right? And then there'll be things that you won't have a view of, but as a mindset coach, I will be able to see. But you have to be bold, and I challenge them. And sometimes, you know, growth is uncomfortable, and I'm totally there for it, to hold up the mirror to them. That is uncomfortable sometimes to look at, and we develop those things. But I find that the greatest driver of human growth comes from a positive place. If you say to someone, what do you feel challenged by? What have you found difficult? What's your problem? Let's solve it. You're starting from a really negative energy place. And a lot of people who go into companies may start like that, or they want to start a company. They say, right, what's the problem? Let's find the solution. But of course, what you've done there is you've taken your mind to problems, right? Whereas when you say to people, how do you want life to look like? How do you want to be? How do you want to live your life? What are some of the results you want to gain? You then go to visioning, and then you aspire, and that provokes and it sets off an energy in you that you feel is possible. And then what you do is, and every client is different, but what you do then is provide the tools and give them the training, and then keep them accountable to creating that change. And it really is a life-changing, examples at the end of it. And for some people, it can happen in 10 sessions. For some people, it happens in 2 years. It depends on where the starting points are.
I'm actually looking at group behavior also, because I'm in executive teams and boards and so on. And I'm trying to get into that space with you and with your experience. One of the things I look at is immersion. Is how can we get people involved in something that is meaningful for them? And I use many tricks. And I recently heard and I've used is when I'm talking about sustainability. So let's have an afternoon on sustainability post lunch. And one of the things we do is to put down and take the AC and take it to 37 degrees or 40 degrees. Remove all the plastic bottles from the room. and it's actually warm. So when you're talking about sustainability and we're talking about climate change and we're talking about all of those things, people are sort of doing that. Like, why is it so hot here? Oh, no, don't worry about it. Can we get the guy to fix the AC? Or where's the water? Where's the water? And the messaging there, and I was guided by somebody on this one, the messaging there is actually very simple, is that now you feel the heat. Now you know what this thing is going to be much, much longer. So the starting process of that shift is that they are now thirsty, they are hot, they are uncomfortable, and now we're having a discussion on climate change. So that immersion becomes very interesting. Do you have any thoughts, any examples of the kinds of immersive activities that you do, young or old, that could be inspirational for our listeners?
So yeah, I love that exercise as well. I think anything where you can actually feel engaged and involved in something really hits home, doesn't it? There's one exercise I absolutely love doing, and we do this in a team environment. So we did this, for example, with the New York Times, and it worked really well. Obviously, there are people with different roles in the room. And I start like this. I say to them, look, what's the project management cycle? There are 4 stages to you doing anything in life. What's the first step? And usually, funnily enough, they say, what do you think they say first?
I don't think about a plan, or I think
That's it. They always say plan, right?
Yeah.
And then I say to them, but Tariq, if I said to you, go away and plan it, what's your question to me? You would say,
yeah.
Plan what, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So the first set obviously isn't planning. It's called initiation, right? It's where you come up with the idea. You come up with the what, what are we going to do? And then obviously
is that the what or is that the why?
Well,
don't
the
you start with the
why is part of the initiation.
Okay.
And then you've got the big idea. So just the what are we going to do? And then you plan how you're going to do it, right?
Okay.
So the why and the what happens here. Then it's the how. And then it's delivery. So execution, the simple stuff. I take them through, so obvious stuff. And then obviously the 4th stage is evaluation. Yeah. So you reflect on how it went and what we can do better. Right, great. And I say to them, lovely. And they think, it's an exercise of saying the obvious. And then I say to them, these 4 different areas, let's say I've got a company with 4 different departments. I want you now to get up and stand up and go to the area where you think you're best at. Are you an ideas person? Are you a, detail-oriented planner? Are you a doer? You just want to get on and deliver and do? Or are you a reflector and somebody who likes to improve things? Go and stand where you think you're best at. And they're like, well, what's my role? I mean, my role is this, but really I'm in my element here. And then anyway, they go and say, I'm giving you the super quick version. We spend a couple of hours on this with a bit more detail. We go around, we talk about it. But the point of it is they stand there. Now, this is the interesting, we talk a lot about what happens at each stage, but I say to them, these are 4 different personality types, right? What do we think?
We use psychometrics for that. I do that in 360-degree structure.
Exactly.
And all of those elements.
There's so many layers to it. Yeah. Exactly. It's exactly that. But when you engage people to think, what kind of personality types, are you a blue sky, thinker, you don't want to be bound by detail? Are you detail orientated, very annoyed by blue sky thinkers? Like, we really don't have time for these ideas. We don't have the budget for this. We don't have to, the detail orientated. Are you somebody whose foot will start going when you want to sit with people who talk about things for too long and you just think we need to be out there experimenting and that's the best way? Or are you really somebody who values that, that the exercise of looking at something, researching how it went and improving it? Now, the 4 different, but these happens in our, not just at work, not just in businesses, but in our social circles as well. So for example, I share this example of going to the cinema. So the ideas person says, write it on the group. Guys, let's go to the cinema. The planner's like, okay, listen, I've got this app. It shows me that such a film is on. But if we go now and we, get a taxi, we're going to get there, 8:05. The film starts at 8:10, but it's okay. First 15 minutes of advert, so much detail. What's this person doing? Is at the cinema. It's like, I heard cinema, I'll go there. There's a film, we watch it. If there's not, it's okay. We go Nando's. And the evaluator's like, You know, I realized that had we shared a cab, it would have been like, you know, we would have shared, you know, we would have been so much better. Or did you see the part in the film where the guy with the red scarf went in the toilet, came out with it? They notice detail, you know, they want to improve things. So I find that when you do this exercise and people understand the elements that they're in, when are you in your element? And then the next part of this exercise is great. Now, if I were to run a successful project and I needed 4 people on my team, where would I select them from? And the obvious answer is 1 from each, right? The fact that we tend to think we build successful teams by surrounding ourselves with people just like us, we have something in common with to keep the peace, but therein lies the mistake, right? When you have friction with people, that is where you know that they're doing their job, they're in their element and you're in yours. And you're not necessarily supposed to always see eye to eye. You're supposed to value the strength that people have in achieving this common aim. And that, I think, is a really powerful exercise. And then they look around the room and they see, you know, then things start to fall in place. They understand and they begin to look at that dynamic of how people work together and who they are, and it relates to how we see the world, how we see other people, and who we are, understanding ourselves and our strengths.
I mean, we can keep chatting away, and you're amazing. What I'd like to do is to share a few emotions and things that are important for the future. When I do my presentations, one of my first slides is that the future is going to be defined by trust, truth, and ethics. In the work that you do, particularly now with all of these new technologies and AI and stuff coming in, the new Mission Impossible film coming in, and you have the rogue entity. What is the importance, in your view, of trust and truth and equity in terms of our lives, and is it more important than before?
For me, I actually think that although people, if you ask them, do you trust the government? Do you trust your bank? Those statistics are low. We may not trust, and yet a staggering amount of people are autopilot anyway. So I think that is the real problem, is our lack of trust doesn't prevent us from becoming more, let's say, proactive in finding or shaping what it is we have lack of trust in, because you'd need to snap out of autopilot and question a status quo to be able to do that. And I feel less and less people are doing that, using that skill, because in an increasingly noisy world, a lot gets lost in it. So I actually think one of the great skills that human beings need to develop isn't necessarily to trust more, because in order to trust more, the not trusting needed to have made a difference, but people are not trusting and yet going along with it anyway. You haven't read it and you don't trust it, but you sign it anyway, because it's as easy as scrolling down and pressing a button and you're done. You just want to set it up. You haven't got time. You've got so many notifications coming in. You just want to get it over with. So not trusting isn't the problem, but not caring enough. I like values. I think values is very important. And there is an onus and a responsibility by providers and those who are shaping technology to provide value. And I loved what you said about, that ethics needs to be strong. But human beings ourselves, the customers, we need to also take action to shape and to be proactive in what we want to engage with and what we don't want to engage with. Because, this is one of the things I was talking about recently. I do a lot of videos, short segments on my socials about mindset things. And one of the things I was saying is, the world is designed to feed us and influence us lots of data. Daily we're taking in 74 gigabytes of information and data. That's the equivalent of Mozart and Vivaldi's music ever created put together. That's a lot of data, and it's all designed to influence you. So therein lies a really important skill, is to, one, remain focused when you need it. to drown things out and focus. I think that is such an important skill, increasingly important. And, you know, the young people that I work with is a real difficulty. You and I have perhaps grown up at a time where there weren't so many distractions. So we developed that skill for many, many years, whereas children today don't have that same level of opportunity to exercise skill called focusing. So I think that that is an important thing. And so is the other thing of cleansing, you know, that all that data doesn't need a place in your mind. You don't need to invite it all in and bring it tea and give it a comfortable space in your mind to sit at. So we have to be really good at switching off, you know, what we allow in, almost like a gatekeeper, strengthen that and develop that skill of focus. I think these are the things that are really important as well.
So as we get towards the end, two final questions. One of them is your view on the future of happiness. And there are a lot of mental health problems, even at a young age, let alone the older ones. The older ones have different kinds of issues. So what is your view on the issue of happiness, and how do you see the future of happiness?
During my study at Stanford, looking at the neuroscience of positive emotion, one of the frameworks that was so key was Seligman's framework on the PERMA. Now, PERMA stands for the 5 key elements of happiness, being positive emotion, engagement, relationships, meaning, and accomplishments. That these are all 5 key elements of what substitutes human happiness. And of course, there's a breadth of information underneath each one that I won't go into right now. But one thing that really occurred to me as I was studying these elements and really doing some really interesting reading on why these things are so key was that it only matters if you're actually banking it, right? You could have meaning, you could have positive emotion, but if it's not really felt, and if it's not invited into your psyche, it's not going to have that impact, right? So I thought of a happiness bank account, okay? Now, this is where you bank happy moments and become wealthy in happiness, in positive human emotion. Now, so simple, Tariq. This is so, I teach my clients this, is that when you're in a moment and you're happy, yeah, of which you would, that's the bottom line. We go on holidays so we can be happy. We do what we do and what we love to be happy. We do, spending time with family. We orchestrate moments to be happy, right? And yet when we're in the moment, we forget to really bank that happiness into our happiness account for it to have impact. So when you're in the moment and you're feeling a sense of happiness or joy, you simply say one sentence, and that is, I feel really happy right now. You acknowledge the happiness. It's simple. You acknowledge the happiness in the moment. And what you're doing there is you're taking that moment and you're banking it. You're acknowledging it. You're depositing it. And there, these moments build a mosaic of what is an overall sense of happiness. Because those 5 key elements that I shared are absolutely key. But if you're not acknowledging meaning or valuing relationships or valuing and really utilizing the happiness you feel from your accomplishments and so forth, then it's futile, right? Then it's just water off a duck's back. Whereas when we're acknowledging these things and collecting these moments and feeling them, they do what they're supposed to do, which is having that positive impact on your mind. And that, I think, is so key to us feeling happier. And happiness, the way I see happiness, people see it traditionally as a destination. If I find the love of my life, if I make money, if I buy a home, if I do this or do whatever people's universal definition of happiness is, then I'll be happy. It's almost something we earn at the end. But of course, that is not at all the point. It's so sad if you reserve happiness till the end, that it is a moment thing. And it also, happiness is it's an act. And you need to exercise it daily. And that's not to say you're happy every minute of every day. I'm an extremely happy person, but I'm not happy every minute of every. I feel a myriad of emotions, and that's because I'm a human being. So we don't need to pressure ourselves to feel happy all the time. That's not realistic. But if we bank our happiness, if we deposit it and we feel it and acknowledge it, then it does what it's supposed to do.
Thank you. That is something I think I'm going to try and really build on that, both personally and out there, is that we need these kinds of acronyms, these frameworks that we have to think through to ensure that we're there.
But just on that, just sorry to interrupt you, but just wanted to say, you see, this is my view. Be careful of frameworks. People need to be careful of frameworks. You know, it's so easy, you know, being a thought leader, I could make my job very easy by doing lots of reading and all the experience that I have of, you know, 20 plus years of working with people and communities, and say, look, guys, that's it. I've come up with the 1 to 10 steps of what I believe is the right way to go, or here is the framework, or here is that. And of course, there are wealth of information that's extremely useful. But the key thing of frameworks and you know, the steps is being able to interpret it and making it extremely personalized to you and your life. You know, and that is what I would definitely advise anyone listening, to be able to have the power to think, how does this relate to me? How is this relevant to me? How can I make this really powerful and impactful for specifically myself and my life and where I'm at and what I want and what I value? And I think that is really, really the key thing.
My final question is that you're a mother, you're a proud mother, and as you look into the future, then you have to leave a little message in a bottle for your kids and everybody's future kids. So let's say they'll pick it up in 5, 6, 10 years' time. What will that message say? What will they discover that mum left behind for?
Love this question, Tariq. Oh, my children, you know, when I have a daughter who's 5 called Ariel Persia and a son called Kian, and he's 8 years old, and I wrote them a letter on their first birthday of all the life lessons that I want them to know, really personalized letter from my heart to them. And if I could answer your question with one thing, I would say, don't lose the ability to see people. You have to really see people. Look around you. Never be too busy. Never be too wrapped up in your view of the world. Now, this makes me a bit emotional, actually, because my life and what I would say the most valuable moments of my life have been in moments where I've really been able to see people who perhaps weren't seen, people who I've shared an unexpected crossing of paths with, for a moment even, and our lives have collided, and I've gained such value in that moment, enriched my life, simply because I was present and I valued that human being and I saw them. And I've asked that, you know, I've sat in airports and asked 80-year-old couple in Miami, what are your secrets to marriage? I've sat on a train when I was 15 years old and asked a very successful businessman, Michael Worrell, who then became my first business mentor when I was 15. And I used to message him on AOL, like an email, asking him questions. And he used to take time to support me and engage in, you know, themes that were very mature for my age in terms of direction of life and learning, simply because we ran into each other running for a train. You know, I've sat with young people. You know, so many stories. I once sat on a train and interviewed a guy who'd just been released from prison. And I was the first person he spoke to after being released from prison. You know, I find that incredibly powerful. And that's my message to my children or other children is, as we move towards a fast pace of life and as we move towards big themes of technology, value comes from seeing people. Never lose the ability to see, build connections, be enriched by people's stories, your story, share it, be true to who you are and never stop learning.
What a wonderful way to bring this to a conclusion. Melody, absolute pleasure as always. Your insights, your thoughts, your passion, your emotion, and I felt it was so important that we connect with those emotions. But thank you for your final message. Thank you for talking about the future of happiness. Thank you for, bringing about change and good positive change in the world. And thank you for looking after our minds. We need a lot of help out here, so we need to do all of that.
Thank you, Tariq. Thank you so much for sharing your important platform and always engaging in such important conversations with people and with your networks. And I think that's such a power. And I really congratulate you on Voices of the Future and the work that you continue to do. And I'm really thrilled to be part of it.
Very kind. And you'll see all of this thing coming through very, very quickly. So thank you, Melody.